Brianna Lyman, who we had on right before the end of the year to talk about history-related issues, is doing a really cool every day 250th anniversary, or every few days 250th anniversary historical marker of what's going on as we celebrate our nation's 250th birthday. And Brianna, you've got a really cool video that is up today for those of us out there like Buck and me and you who are big history people. Today is the 250th anniversary of the release of Common Sense. So for people who might have forgotten some of their history, Brianna, thanks for coming on with us. Thomas Paine's probably the most most famous pamphlet of all time. But what exactly occurred, and how are people going to be able to now pass their AP history exams, or maybe impress their kids who are in AP history like mine? Tell us what happened 250 years ago today, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And then 250 years ago today didn't just change the fate of essentially changed the world. So Thomas Paine is unlike any of the other founders, and Thomas Paine is not necessarily a founder, but he's unlike any man of that generation. You have Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Sam Adams, John Adams. These are the greatest thinkers of their time, but they don't speak in a way that is necessarily palatable to the average American. And that's where Thomas Paine comes in. So Thomas Paine has a very good prose where he is able to deliver the ideas of the Revolution of Enlightenment in a way that the average farmer or shopkeeper can understand. So he comes out with Common Sense today, 250 years ago. It's originally published anonymously. And the big thing it does is it says to colonists, trust what you feel. And he says, look, you are made in God's image. God has made all men equal. You are not being treated as equal. You feel angry about that. Trust those feelings. And at this point in the revolution, a lot of colonists were still on the fence. They didn't know if they wanted to be loyalists, if they wanted to be neutral, or if they wanted to join the cause. This pamphlet helps push so many people over the edge, and it basically becomes the biggest bestseller aside from the Bible in 1776.
Astonishing stuff, and especially to do all this and to have such impact, Brianna, before Twitter and TikTok and Facebook and all of these things. Although I guess you could say in some ways the pamphleteers of their era, it was kind of the original viral content, right? And had a tremendous effect on those who read it. Paine went on to get a little over his skis in the French Revolution, if I remember.
Yeah, he actually did. He ended up in jail. He, in fact, wrote to Washington, basically asking for help. And Washington, is known as the guy that you don't get nasty with Washington, and you certainly don't do it in public. And so I believe the story is when Washington ignored Paine's private letters for help, Paine went and made those public, and Washington was irate. So Washington did not step in and help when Paine became troubled. And when Paine died a few years later, only 6 people attended his funeral, because at the time he was not considered this great enlightened thinker. He was, a rebel rouser. He caused a lot of problems in France and even in the colonies at some points. But now, of course, we look back and say this pamphlet changed the course of the revolution and brought on colonists who were on the fence.
Brianna, for people out there, because I'm reading right now, I just finished it. These are big books. Rick Atkinson has got a trilogy about the Revolutionary War. Volume 2 just came out in the last 6 months or so. And it's fantastic. What would you suggest? You're a big history person. America 250. What couple of books, or what would you suggest would be a good way for this audience and for people out there who may just haven't experienced as much of American history as they would like? What would you suggest they should seek out? What would be good to read?
Ooh, yeah. Obviously, Common Sense, I think, is great, especially because it's, time period accurate and relative to today. John Dickinson, his, letters to the farmer were really important in the years prior to the revolution. I think people should avoid Ken Burns' documentary, that's my thing of what not to do, just because I think it's a little bit of a left-wing tale of the American Revolution. But primary documents are extremely important. Reading letters, I think in particular from John Adams, Hamilton, Hancock, that's going to be where you're going to feel the spirit of the revolution. And also coming to my Twitter page and watching Countdown to Freedom every day, 2 minutes and less, to talk about the American Revolution.
So can you tell everybody about this so that it's a great opportunity for you to pitch this to a lot of, we have We have history. I'm going to say this, Clay. I think we have one of the biggest collections of history nerds in the world right now.
I think that's accurate.
All with us. We get excited about this. Clay and I go into tangents about random history stuff. He's a big Civil War guy. I like, ancient Greece and Rome and revolution stuff. Not as big into the Civil War as Clay. But people love history who are listening to you right now. What is this 2 minutes, and what are you bringing together with it?
Yeah, so I was inspired to do this because my 7th great grandfather served in the 3rd Massachusetts Provincial Congress with Hancock and Adams. So I feel like it's my obligation to kind of carry the legacy of 1776 forward. But basically, every day in 2 minutes or less, I want to walk viewers through what was happening on this day in 1776, because a lot of people think the revolution was easy, that it was easy to convince the colonists to join the fight, that it was kind of, a one and done. But it was not that sort of thing. The Enlightenment ideas that the founders were bringing to the American people were not palatable. They were certainly not liked at anywhere or any place in the entire world except for the colonies, really. And the founders did what no other people could do. And, Buck, you mentioned the French Revolution. The French wanted to replicate what we did, and they failed. They couldn't do it to the degree we did it. We were the only people who could do it. So this countdown to freedom is supposed to help Americans understand just how intense the fight was for freedom, and that it was not given to us. It was won by blood and sacrifice and a lot of turmoil.
Brianna, one thing that I think gets lost, because I am reading more and more about the founding era. Buck's right. I love the Civil War, but I've been reading more and more about the Revolutionary era. The degree of intelligence and education from a historical perspective that all of our founding fathers had, I don't think gets talked about enough, because they were trying to learn from all of the failures of history as it pertained to government when they were creating this new government. And they all spoke a common language. They understood the history of Greece and Rome and everything throughout the course of human history. And this may be disappointing. How well do you think our current political leaders understand history, and how much does that hamstring them often because they don't have the same depth of knowledge that 250 years ago, the guys who founded this country, we were fortunate enough, did have?
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be honest. Thomas Paine, for example, I think he dropped out of school when he was like 12 or 13 years old. So many of the founders only got education up until maybe their mid-teens, but they were getting a good education, right? They're not being saddled with sociology and all this left-wing, drama we talk about today, environmentalist issues, racism, all that stuff. They were focused on the core things that mattered. The other thing that they had that we just do not have is they had a robust religious atmosphere, right? Christianity was the impetus for the entire revolution, because the founders looked and saw that the Bible says in Genesis, all men are created equal in God's image, right? If all men are created in God's image, all men must be equal. They applied that fundamental Christian teaching to every single thing they did. That was the basis for the entire revolution. We don't have politicians, that are that religious, that understand religion and theology that deeply, and they don't really have a compass to guide them, except for whatever's, the flavor of the month. And that's the problem.
What is, if you're giving some recos here, other than your 2 minutes of history, which I think a lot of people now are going to be going to check out, what are some either books, series, or movies on the revolution that you would recommend to an audience of history super nerds?
Well, I think my first go-to place is go to Claremont Institute. I just did a fellowship this year. They are the premier thinkers of Enlightenment ideology and of the founding, and they have a ton of stuff. Charles Kessler, Glenn Elmers. These are people that understand the founding in a way no one else does. They have videos, articles. You go watch that. There's a great book called The Cause. I'm drawing a blank on the name. I think it's by a guy with the first name John, but I'll tweet that out. I think also it's fun to watch movies like The Patriot, like Gettysburg. I know Gettysburg is obviously about the Civil War, but it really shows you, because the Civil War was the last battle of the Revolution, if we think about the Revolution as being all men are created equal. So those are really good movies just to kind of put you in that spirit and give you a backdrop that you may not necessarily get before you go dig into those deep and heavy readings.
I have The Road to Charleston here, Clay. I'm looking at it. It's on the top of my next up stack. I have a stack of I have stacks of books that are that's how I arrange these things. And I have The Road to Charleston just off camera, which gets into a whole lot of things, including the British huffiness about officers being shot that you see in The Patriot. That was a real thing. They actually thought, hey, how dare you shoot our officers? And the Americans were like, yeah, dude, we're shooting your officers.
By the way, the book, The Cause, is what you were referencing, the American Revolution and its Discontents, I believe, by Joseph Ellis. And I know we brought you on to talk Revolutionary War, but I know you also are a Civil War person. Did you see Tim Walz refer to the current situation in Minneapolis as the equivalent of the third day of the Battle of Gettysburg, Brianna?
Oh, believe me, I did. And that was the most reckless thing on top of calling this a murder that Tim Walz or the Democrats could do, because we have watched over the past, 2 years, Democrats make clear they're in an open rebellion against the federal government and against federal immigration law. And then he doubles down on that and publicly basically says, we're in like a little quasi civil war with the federal government. If that is the case, then President Trump needs to respond accordingly to states that clearly want to secede.
There we go.
Good stuff. Find her at the Federalist, Brianna Lyman. Fantastic stuff. We'll have you on again. And again, 2 minutes. Maybe you got kids or grandkids out there that don't have great long-term commitment to history. You can share some of these videos with her, including the Thomas Paine information today. Thank you, Brianna.
Thanks so much.
Credit card bills are looking pretty large this month, especially if you ran up a balance last month, right? Now you're looking at it and you go, oh, that's no fun. Christmas shopping will do that, though. We all want to be generous. We all want to play the role of Saint Nick at the end of the year. So if you're looking for ways to soften the cash flow crunch, switching your cell phone service is just an easy way to put more cash on your balance sheet, my friends. How about saving $50 a month by switching your cell phone service to Pure Talk this month? That'll save you about $600 to $1,000 in 2026. That's right. In 1 year, you're talking about a $600 to $1,000 of savings. And I can tell you, Pure Talk is my provider. I'm on a Pure Talk network. They're great at customer service. My calls, crystal clear. They're on the same 5G towers as one of the big names out there. But you can get down to $20 a month for unlimited talk, text, and 3 gigs of high-speed data with Pure Talk. You just can't beat these prices. Dial pound 250, say Clay and Buck, and Pure Talk's U.S. customer service team will help you switch in minutes. Dial pound 250, say Clay and Buck, talk, text, and data for just $20 a month. All you got to do, dial pound 250, say Clay and Buck, and switch to Pure Talk today.